Some ruins don't just belong to the past. They feel like warnings from something we've yet to understand. Scattered across the earth are massive stone structures, carved with a precision we can't replicate, cities lost beneath jungles, deserts, and oceans, and artifacts so strange they resemble messages from a forgotten world. Mainstream history offers no real answers. Science tries and fails to fit these anomalies into our accepted timeline. But perhaps we've been asking the wrong questions all along. In this journey, we won't just explore ancient sites. We'll confront the limits of what we think we know, because every discovery seems to whisper of something deeper, older, and far more intelligent than we ever imagined. What if an entire city bustling with temple ships and life vanished so completely that the world forgot it ever existed? No ruins, no records, just water. For over 1,000 years, it was no more than a phantom Heraclean, or Thonis, whispered in scattered texts, dismissed as myth confused with legend. Some said Heracles had once set foot there. Others believed it was a ceremonial gateway to ancient Egypt. But no one could find it. It was as if history itself had covered its tracks. Maps bore no mark of it. Archaeology found no trace. And so for centuries, Heraclean lived only in rumor, a lost name adrift in the sea of forgotten civilizations. Until one day the sea began to speak. In the silty, murky depths off Egypt's northern coast, something stirred beneath the waves. Massive statues, broken temples, sunken ships. A city, intact, silent, preserved in time. And with it came a chilling question. How does a city just vanish? In the year 2000, French underwater archaeologist Frank Gaudiot and his team were surveying the seabed near Abu Qir, just off the coast of modern-day Alexandria. They weren't searching for lost cities, they were scanning for 18th century French warships. But what they discovered was far more ancient and far more astonishing. Beneath 10 meters of silt and seawater, they began to uncover monumental stone blocks, colossal statues, and the unmistakable layout of a city. There were temples, entire sanctuaries preserved beneath the waves. Giant statues of gods and pharaohs still upright in the seabed. Over 70 ancient ships scattered across the harbor, trapped in time. Hundreds of anchors, ceremonial offerings, jewelry, gold, coins, even bilingual inscriptions in both Greek and Egyptian. They had found Heracleon. It was not a myth. It was real. And not only that, it had been immaculately preserved under the ocean for over a millennium. What shocked archaeologists wasn't just the discovery of the city, but its sheer scale and significance. Heracleon had once been Egypt's primary Mediterranean port, a hub of religion, culture, and commerce. Before Alexandria rose to power, Heracleon was the crown jewel of the Delta. But that led to an even greater question. How does a city like this disappear without a trace? It was a city built on glory. For centuries, Heracleon had been the main entry point into Egypt from the Mediterranean. A place where taxes were collected, offerings made to the gods, and foreign emissaries were received with fanfare. Ships from Greece, Phoenicia, and beyond lined its harbors. Temples towered above the coastline. The city buzzed with religion, trade, and ceremony. And then it was gone. Not faded, not conquered, but wiped clean from the face of the earth. There are no ancient records describing its downfall, no papyrus scroll mourning its destruction, no Greek historians retelling a heroic last stand, only a terrifying silence. The kind of silence that suggests no one survived. Modern scientists were puzzled. How could an entire metropolis vanish without a trace? Why were so many intact ships found in the bay? Why did statues over 5 meters tall end up buried upright, preserved like time capsules. The clues lay not in the ruins, but beneath them. Heracleion was built on the soft, waterlogged ground of the Nile Delta, a land rich in silt clay and ancient sediments, fertile for farming, deadly for foundations. When researchers studied the geological layers, they began to understand. The land beneath Heracleion wasn't solid stone. It was saturated mud, barely holding itself together under the immense weight of temples and monuments. Then came the final blow. At some unknown point, perhaps a quiet morning, perhaps during a storm, an earthquake struck. Not a massive one, just enough to shake the delicate balance of land and water. But that's all it took. The ground began to liquefy. This phenomenon, known as soil liquefaction, is one of nature's most insidious forces. When water-saturated ground is shaken even briefly, it loses its ability to bear weight. Solid earth turns to quicksand. Entire structures begin to sink straight down. Imagine standing in a bustling city square, priests chanting inside a temple, vendors calling to ships, and then with no warning, the earth groans. Statues tip, docks collapse. A temple crumbles inward, its stone walls no longer supported. The soil beneath the harbor dissolves into sludge, dragging anchored ships down like leaves into a whirlpool. There is no time to flee, no high ground to run to. The water comes fast, thick with sand and debris. Roofs vanish, streets disappear. Voices are drowned mid-cry. The sea doesn't crash in, it seeps, rises, and swallows. By the time the shaking stops, there is nothing left above water. Only ripples, floating fragments, and silence. It may have taken a few terrifying hours, or less than one. What's left today is the imprint of that moment. Temples collapsed inward, not outward. Ships found in unnatural angles. Colossal statues upright, but half buried, as if the city didn't fall over, but was pulled downward. And so Heracleion was lost, not to war, not to plague, but to the hidden instability of the very ground it stood on. A slow-motion catastrophe triggered in an instant. And for the next 200 years, no one even remembered it had existed. Modern studies have confirmed much of the story. Heracleion's foundations were built on weak deltaic soil, prone to erosion and liquefaction. Minor seismic tremors, possibly combined with flooding or a tidal wave, would have been enough to sink it. But even today, researchers still puzzle over several disturbing details. Why were there so many ships docked in the harbor at once? Did the disaster occur during a religious festival, a major trading day? Were those sailors trapped by rising waters? Or did the ships sink with the city pulled down as the seafloor opened beneath them? Why are there no historical documents describing Heracleion's destruction? Egypt at that time kept detailed religious and economic records, so why was the loss of such an important city completely omitted? And most curiously, why were parts of the city so well preserved? Normally cities collapse slowly. Temples fall. Walls erode. But in Heracleion's case, the preservation suggests a rapid submersion with minimal post-collapse disturbance. Almost as if the ocean itself wanted to keep it sealed. Some theories even suggest underground voids, gas pockets, or ancient fault lines may have played a role, creating a kind of sudden sinkhole on a massive scale. Was this the result of natural erosion over time? Or was there a singular cataclysmic moment, a final earthquake, a flash flood, a geological collapse that took everything down at once? We may never know. What we do know is that Heracleion didn't just vanish, it was devoured. Today, the ruins of Heracleion lie still beneath the waters of Abu Qir Bay. Divers and archaeologists continue to explore its submerged streets, slowly piecing together the layout of temples, docks, and neighborhoods long forgotten. But most of the city remains untouched, buried under meters of mud and mystery. Recovery is delicate, time-consuming, and every new artifact pulled from the seabed only deepens the sense of awe and unease. Because Heracleion is not just an archaeological marvel, it's a warning, a reminder that even the greatest human achievements, cities of stone temples to the gods, centers of power and prestige, can be wiped away in a moment, not by invaders, not by fire, but by the very ground beneath our feet. Heracleion is Egypt's Atlantis, but unlike Atlantis, it was real. And now, after more than 1,000 years in darkness, it whispers back to us through broken statues and sunken temples, a lost world, preserved in silence. In the scorching sands of Egypt's Valley of the Kings, a forgotten doorway was reopened in 1922, and with it, perhaps a curse that would haunt the modern world. British archaeologist Howard Carter, after years of searching, finally uncovered what many believed had been lost forever: the tomb of the young pharaoh Tutankhamun. Unlike other royal tombs that had been looted or destroyed, this one remained almost completely intact. Behind a sealed stone wall was a treasure trove, a time capsule of gold, ritual, and silence, preserved for more than 3,000 years. It wasn't just an archaeological discovery, it was a resurrection of ancient civilization. Inside the tomb were over 5,000 artifacts, golden thrones, lavish chariots, gem-encrusted daggers, statues of gods, and the king himself, embalmed and resting in a solid gold coffin. Tutankhamun had died young, likely before turning 20, after a short and uneventful reign. But no one anticipated what came next. Just months after the tomb was opened, Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's main sponsor, died suddenly from an infected mosquito bite. It was said that the lights in Cairo went out at the exact moment of his death. In England, his dog reportedly let out a final howl and died shortly after. Whether these stories were embellished or not, the idea of an ancient curse began to take root. What began as celebration quickly turned into unease and then fear. Just a few months after the tomb was opened, Lord Carnarvon, the man who had funded the entire excavation, died suddenly. The cause was shockingly mundane: a mosquito bite on his cheek, which became infected after he accidentally cut it while shaving. The infection led to septicemia, and within days, he was dead. But it wasn't just the death itself, it was the circumstances. At the precise moment Carnarvon died in Cairo, it was reported that the city experienced a total blackout. Back in England, his dog Susie, hundreds of miles away, let out a chilling howl and dropped dead. The coincidences were too eerie to ignore. Then came more deaths. George J. Gould, a wealthy American visitor who entered the tomb, developed a sudden fever and died days later. Hugh Evelyn White, a British archaeologist who worked on the site, took his own life, leaving behind a note written in his own blood saying he had succumbed to the curse. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed, a radiologist who x-rayed Tutankhamun's mummy, died mysteriously before he could even analyze the results. Even Howard Carter's own personal secretary, Richard Bethel, was found smothered to death in his bed under unexplained circumstances. His father, Lord Westbury, threw himself from a building shortly afterward. In total, over 20 individuals linked to the tomb died within just a few years, many under strange, violent, or medically inexplicable conditions. Some dismissed it all as superstition, but others couldn't shake the feeling that something ancient had been disturbed and that the retribution was real. The phrase whispered through the corridors of museums and libraries was always the same: death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the king's rest. Whether this inscription ever truly existed remains debated, but by then it didn't matter. The curse had already written itself not on stone, but in blood. Faced with growing public hysteria, scientists and medical professionals sought to find rational explanations. Could an ancient tomb, sealed for thousands of years, really be deadly, or was this simply the result of paranoia and sensational journalism? One of the first theories focused on airborne mold, specifically Aspergillus flavus, a type of fungus that produces toxic spores. In sealed environments with organic materials like mummies, wooden chariots, or linen wrappings, such fungi can flourish. Inhaling large quantities of these spores can lead to severe respiratory infections, especially in people with weakened immune systems. Could the tomb have been a microbial time bomb? Another possibility involved bacteria, such as Staphylococcus or Pseudomonas, thriving in the humid conditions of the tomb and transferred through handling the artifacts. These pathogens might have caused sudden infections or sepsis in some of the deceased, including Lord Carnarvon. Psychologists proposed a different angle, the nocebo effect. This phenomenon occurs when negative expectations cause real physical symptoms. If someone genuinely believes they are cursed, stress and fear can weaken their immune response, elevate blood pressure, disrupt sleep, and even lead to fatal complications. In other words, the power of belief could kill just as surely as poison or disease. Still, there are flaws in every theory. Many of those who died were relatively young and healthy. Others who spent far more time inside the tomb, including Howard Carter himself, lived for decades afterward without incident. Carter died peacefully in 1939 at the age of 64, never once admitting to fearing a curse. So why did some die and others didn't? Science has yet to offer a clear answer, because while germs mold and psychology can explain much, they cannot explain everything. Not the timing, not the eerie patterns, not the overwhelming sense of dread reported by those who stepped inside that chamber. It is here that science stares into the eyes of something it rarely acknowledges, the unexplained. And the ancient world, for a moment, seems to look back. Tutankhamun's tomb was modest, much smaller than the grand resting places of Ramses II or Seti thrones. The wall paintings were simple, the rooms narrow, and yet because it had remained perfectly preserved, its impact surpassed all others. While other tombs were looted, erased, or forgotten, Tutankhamun's was hidden, protected by sandtime, and perhaps fate. Because he was a minor forgotten king, his final resting place was spared, and through that obscurity, he became eternal. Compared to the grandeur of the pyramids of Giza or the magnificence of Abu Simbel, Tutankhamun's tomb is humble, but its influence is unmatched. Tutankhamun was never meant to be famous. He ascended the throne as a child, ruled for less than 10 years, and left behind no great monuments or military victories. But in death, through strange coincidence or cosmic irony, he became the most famous pharaoh on earth. His golden death mask is now a symbol of ancient Egypt itself. His name is known by schoolchildren and scholars alike, and his story, not of glory, but of mystery and death, has been etched into history. In the end, the most powerful thing inside Tutankhamun's tomb was not the gold, not the power. It was fear. Fear that we do not fully understand the past. Fear that some doors were never meant to be opened. And a quiet realization that some stories are not finished even after 3,000 years. Because sometimes when we open the door to the ancient world, it's the ancient world that's watching us. Hidden within the rain-soaked lowlands and dense jungles of southern Costa Rica lies one of archaeology's most enduring enigmas. Hundreds of massive stone spheres, some no larger than a melon, others weighing more than 15 tons. Scattered across fields, forest clearings, and archaeological sites, they sit without explanation, nearly perfect in form, utterly silent in purpose. These spheres, made from some of the hardest stone on Earth, have withstood centuries of tropical storms, earthquakes, and human disturbance. And yet, for all their endurance, they have left behind no clues, no inscriptions, and no clear origin story. No one knows exactly when they were made, though most date them to between 300 and 1500 CE. Even more puzzling, we have no idea who carved them or why. These artifacts don't fit neatly into the known frameworks of ancient Central American civilizations. The culture that likely created them, the Defys, left behind little else. No cities, no temples, no written language, only these extraordinary geometric monoliths strewn across the land like forgotten pieces of a puzzle no one knows how to solve. To this day, scholars and scientists continue to ask, why the sphere? Why choose the most difficult shape in geometry, one that requires perfect symmetry from every angle, when there were far easier ways to shape stone? In the ancient world, shapes were rarely just aesthetic. They held meaning, symbolism, power. In many cultures, the circle or sphere represents wholeness, eternity, unity, the heavens themselves. Could it be that these forms held cosmic or spiritual significance for the people who made them, and what were they for? Were they boundary markers, status symbols, sacred offerings, astronomical tools? Theories abound, but none have been proven. And with every unanswered question, the mystery deepens. Because unlike many ancient artifacts, these spheres offer no written language to translate, no carved image to interpret, no mythology to decode. They offer only silence and perfection. What makes these spheres even more remarkable is their sheer technical precision. Some of them are nearly perfect spheres, with a margin of error so small it rivals the capabilities of modern machinery. And they're made from materials like granite and gabbro stones that are notoriously hard to work with, even using metal tools. Yet the people who shaped these stones are believed to have had no iron, no steel, and no wheels, no cranes, no measuring instruments as we know them. John Hoops, a leading archaeologist who has studied the spheres extensively, once remarked that if he didn't know better, he would assume they were crafted using modern industrial methods. But they weren't. They were made by hand by people whose knowledge has vanished. And with no surviving tools or unfinished examples, we can't even begin to reconstruct how they did it. Like many of the world's greatest archaeological mysteries, Costa Rica's stone spheres invite comparisons to other ancient wonders. There's Stonehenge, where massive stones were aligned with astronomical events. There are the Moai of Easter Island's solemn faces carved in volcanic rock. And of course, the pyramids of Egypt, structures so precise they continue to inspire awe millennia after their construction. But Costa Rica's spheres are different. They don't depict gods. They don't commemorate kings. They don't even seem to follow any specific religious iconography. They don't reach toward the sky like pyramids, nor face the ocean like the Moai. They simply sit grounded in place, timeless, and still, as if their very existence is enough. There is no narrative, no triumphal message carved into their surfaces. And perhaps that in itself is their message. No ancient civilization left behind a legacy quite as peculiar as that of the Defy's nearly perfect stone spheres, weighing anywhere from a few hundred kilograms to over 15 tons, scattered across the southern regions of Costa Rica. What puzzles researchers most isn't just their shape. It's the pressing question, how could ancient people have carved granite, one of the hardest rocks on Earth, without any metal tools? Granite ranks between 6 and 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, comparable to materials that today require diamond-tipped saws for precision cutting. And yet the Defy's people, who lived between roughly AD 300 and 1500, had no knowledge of steel no use of the wheel, and left behind no written records of stoneworking techniques. Some scholars suggest they may have used fire to heat the rock, followed by cold water to cause cracking, then slowly shaped the stone using harder materials like quartzite. The polishing phase might have involved sand water and an immense amount of manual labor. But modern archaeological experiments show that such methods only work on small stones, typically under a few dozen kilograms, and even then, shaping a modestly sized sphere requires many months of continuous effort. For spheres exceeding 10 tons, the theory falls apart unless supported by advanced lifting and measuring systems, none of which were available at the time. John Hoops, a researcher from the University of Kansas who has conducted extensive fieldwork on these spheres, stated, "There are no tools, no measuring templates, no clearly defined methods, yet the results are nearly perfect. That is the greatest paradox. Even more perplexing, no ancient workshops have ever been discovered. There are no remains of ropes levers or transport infrastructure. Some spheres were found dozens of kilometers away from their presumed quarry sources, resting in remote forested or mountainous areas. This raises yet another mystery. How did people without wheels or draft animals move multi-ton granite balls across rough terrain? All we are left with is the result, immaculate enduring stone spheres, while the process behind them has completely vanished. It's as though the decrease once held a body of knowledge, unwritten, unrecorded, that was lost to time, along with their civilization itself. Most ancient civilizations sought to immortalize themselves through grandeur, soaring pyramids, majestic temples, colossal statues of gods and kings. The Dikis, however, chose something altogether different. They left behind circles, no inscriptions, no gods, no depictions of rulers or daily life, just abstract geometric forms rendered with astonishing precision. This minimalist legacy has led anthropologists to believe that the Dikis may have possessed a radically different worldview, one not centered on narrative or hierarchy, but on symbolism, abstraction, and cosmic order. In countless cultures across time, the circle represents eternity, the cycle of time, the sun, the universe itself. A shape with no beginning and no end, a metaphor for a non-linear, interconnected cosmos. What stands out even more than the geometry is the utter silence the Dikis left behind. While the Egyptians inscribed the names of their pharaohs into stone, and the Maya meticulously recorded the celestial calendar, the Dikis left no stories, no symbols, no voices. They carved a perfect sphere and left it there. Rather than interpret this simplicity as a sign of primitive thinking, it prompts a deeper question. Perhaps they felt no need to tell a story. Perhaps to them, the circle said everything. It may have been an offering to nature, a monument to time, or a philosophical symbol where beauty lies not in extravagance, but in the quiet perfection of form. Archaeologist Iphigenia Quintanilla, a specialist in the Dikis region, once remarked, "We tend to believe that ancient people needed monuments to be remembered. But maybe the Dikis simply wanted to leave behind a question. Indeed, what they left was not an answer, but a complete mystery, without words, without direction, just a circle in the forest, inviting future generations to search for meaning in the silence. A legacy without words. Today, many of these spheres are preserved in museums or returned to sites like Finca 6, now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But preservation does not mean understanding. For all the satellites' 3D scans and archaeological research, we remain no closer to grasping their full meaning than we were a century ago. Unlike the Egyptians, who wrote their stories in stone, or the Maya, who encoded their calendars in glyphs, the Dikis chose not to explain themselves. Their legacy is not built from towering temples or engraved legends. It's built from geometry and silence. And in that silence, there is something deeply haunting, because it suggests that we are not only missing information, we are missing the entire framework for understanding. In a world obsessed with answers, perhaps the greatest value of the stone spheres is that they continue to defy them. They challenge our assumptions about what it means to leave a legacy. They suggest that the past is not always meant to be decoded, that some mysteries endure because they were never meant to be solved. The Dikis left no words, no warnings, no instructions, only a shape, a perfect, eternal shape, and a question that has echoed through the jungle for over 1,000 years. Why? Nestled in the fertile plains of the Indus River in what is now modern-day Pakistan, lies Mohenjo-Daro, one of the most remarkable ancient cities of the Indus Valley civilization. Its name, Mound of the Dead, already carries a sense of mystery and solemnity. But what truly makes this site extraordinary is the level of advancement it achieved more than 4,500 years ago. The city was meticulously planned, with grid-like streets, standardized baked brick houses, and an underground drainage system, an urban infrastructure that wouldn't appear in many parts of Europe for millennia. Mohenjo-Daro featured public bathhouses and even private toilets in individual homes, a luxury unheard of in other civilizations of the same period. Compared to other great centers like Ur in Mesopotamia or Thebes in ancient Egypt, Mohenjo-Daro felt like it belonged to another era altogether, a future where people had already mastered how to design, organize, and manage urban life with astonishing efficiency. But the real mystery doesn't lie in how advanced the city was. It lies in how it disappeared. The entire city, with no signs of invasion or war, no evidence of natural disaster, was suddenly and completely abandoned. There were no fortifications, no weapons, no remains of conflict or defense. The city simply emptied out. During excavations, archaeologists found human skeletons lying across the streets. The positions of these remains suggested that people had been going about their daily lives when they suddenly collapsed, unburied, unprotected, with no signs of violence. It was as if something invisible and unstoppable swept through the city, ending lives in an instant. There were no burn marks, no mass graves, no clear cause of death. And with that, Mohenjo-Daro became one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in the history of archaeology. As researchers dug deeper, they discovered something even more disturbing. Many of the bricks used to build the city had been heavily damaged. Some were cracked, others partially melted, and in certain areas, the bricks had even vitrified, transformed into glass-like material. This can only happen when subjected to extreme temperatures far beyond what any ancient kiln could produce. Even stranger, this phenomenon wasn't spread evenly throughout the site. It was concentrated in specific areas, as though there had been an explosion or a blast center. These locations showed no trace of fire, no volcanic ash, no signs of natural combustion. It was as if a sudden, invisible, and intensely hot force had appeared, devastated everything in its path, and then vanished, leaving behind scorched bricks and unanswered questions. From this, a haunting theory began to take shape, one that questioned everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. In the 1970s, researcher David Davenport proposed a shocking idea. What if Mohenjo-Daro had been the site of an ancient nuclear explosion? According to some unofficial reports, several of the skeletons discovered at the site displayed radiation levels far beyond what is naturally occurring in the region. Davenport even claimed that the epicenter of this hypothetical blast could be identified, marked by the most intense, heat damage, vitrified materials, and the highest concentration of scattered human remains. Though no official scientific study has confirmed these radiation levels, the comparison has been made. What if the levels were similar to those found at Hiroshima? The implications would be world-altering. Yet, there are no natural uranium deposits in the area, no evidence of reactors, no ruins of any energy-based facility. Just the melted bricks, the collapsed bodies, and an eerie silence that science still struggles to explain. Mainstream archaeologists have been quick to reject the theory, citing lack of verified data and insufficient evidence. But still, the core question remains: if not radiation, then what caused temperatures high enough to melt bricks and wipe out a city in an instant? If archaeological evidence wasn't enough to stir the imagination, ancient literature added fuel to the fire. In the Indian epic Mahabharata, there are passages that describe godlike weapons with the power to destroy entire armies in the blink of an eye. One verse in particular is often quoted: a single projectile burst with the brilliance of 10,000 suns. Bodies were burned beyond recognition, hair and nails fell out. Waters boiled and fish floated dead. The ground scorched and cracked. These are not vague metaphors, they sound astonishingly like a modern nuclear explosion. And when paired with the scene at Mohenjo-Daro, collapsed bodies in the streets, bricks melted by heat, a city frozen mid-life, it's hard not to wonder, was this the place where an ancient epic became reality? Could these ancient texts be more than mythology, perhaps distant memories of a very real and forgotten disaster? There are plenty of strange and ancient sites in the world. Pompeii was buried in volcanic ash, its victims preserved mid-escape. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey dates back over 10,000 years and was built with a level of sophistication unthinkable for its time. Yonaguni, the submerged structure off Japan's coast, may be the remains of a sunken, man-made complex, but none of them are quite like Mohenjo-Daro. Pompeii was destroyed by a volcano, there's no doubt. Göbekli Tepe was intentionally buried but shows no signs of destruction. Yonaguni is mysterious but lacks clear evidence of habitation. Mohenjo-Daro stands alone, an advanced city wiped out suddenly with melted materials, signs of extreme heat, possible radiation, and written records that echo modern warfare. Among all archaeological enigmas, this is perhaps the only site where so many unexplainable threads converge into one overwhelming silence. Mainstream scholars have long dismissed the theory of an ancient nuclear explosion, and not without reason. There's no evidence of uranium mining, no reactors, no technology capable of creating such devastation. Reports of radiation remain unverified, and most of the data comes from non-peer-reviewed sources. Some suggest that the theory belongs to science fiction or pseudoscience, bolstered by fans of ancient aliens or fantasy civilizations. But even these skeptics struggle to explain everything. No conventional theory fully accounts for the unique combination of events at Mohenjo-Daro, the advanced city layout, the sudden disappearance, the vitrified bricks, and the strange coincidences with ancient texts. Point-by-point science may deny each claim, but taken together, the mystery refuses to go away. To believers of more expansive theories, Mohenjo-Daro is more than a city. It's a remnant of a lost civilization that once ruled the earth and was destroyed by its own power. It may have been connected to Atlantis or descended from some other long-forgotten global culture. Imagine a world where science had once reached unimaginable heights only to collapse in a moment of hubris. Perhaps Mohenjo-Daro was once the center of that power, and its destruction wasn't just a local tragedy, but the final echo of a warning carved into stone. Now, thousands of years later, the city remains, not just as ruins, but as a message to the future, waiting for someone ready to understand it. Conclusion: a gateway into an unwritten past. Even if the theory of a prehistoric nuclear explosion remains unaccepted by modern science, Mohenjo-Daro endures as a living enigma. It forces us to ask hard questions. Were ancient people more advanced than we believe? Could myths hold forgotten truths? And how much of our past has vanished before it was ever written? Perhaps among the scorched bricks, the silent skeletons, and the timeless verses of ancient poetry, Mohenjo-Daro is still whispering a story we've never truly heard. Amid the arid deserts of Ica in southern Peru, where the sun scorches the sand and the wind whispers through ancient landscapes, people stumbled upon small dark stones that at first seemed unremarkable. Heavy in the hand, smooth to the touch, they appeared to be nothing more than nature's leftovers. But as curious eyes peered closely at their surfaces, an entirely different world revealed itself, one not found in any history book. Etched into these stones were images beyond belief: humans performing brain surgeries, riding dinosaurs, gazing at the stars through telescopes, and piloting what looked like hovering machines. These weren't mere rocks, they were time capsules, and if they were real, then everything we thought we knew about human history would need to be rewritten from the ground up. No one could remain indifferent when faced with the engravings found on the Ica stones. They weren't just unusual, they directly challenged logic, science, and our understanding of time. One figure appears to be conducting open chest surgery, wielding what seems to be precision medical tools. Another group watches the heavens through instruments uncannily similar to telescopes, despite the fact that such devices weren't invented for many centuries after these stones were supposedly carved. And perhaps most astonishingly, there are scenes of humans living and working side by side with dinosaurs, hunting with them, riding them, or simply coexisting as if that were perfectly normal. The level of detail is eerie, almost photographic, as if the artist had personally witnessed everything depicted. And so a question begins to press forward, one that's impossible to ignore. Could these stones be memories, records of a civilization long lost, a society that once existed and then vanished without a trace? As shocking and controversial as they are, the Ica stones are not the only archaeological anomalies that have left experts baffled. Not far from Ica, the Nazca lines stretch across the desert floor, massive geoglyphs only fully visible from the air, though the people who created them had no known means of flight. Thousands of miles away, in ancient Mesopotamia, Sumerian clay tablets from over 5,000 years ago describe the solar system with stunning accuracy, even identifying planets that were not officially discovered until the modern era. But what makes the Ica stones truly unique is the story they seem to tell. They don't merely convey knowledge, they suggest the existence of an entire lost society, a world where humans lived among dinosaurs, conducted complex brain surgeries, and explored the stars through advanced technology. They don't just challenge our science, they challenge our very sense of identity as a species. From the moment they were brought to public attention in the 1960s, the Ica stones ignited one of the most enduring controversies in the world of alternative archaeology. It all began with a single peculiar gift, a smooth, dark stone, engraved with the image of what looked like an extinct fish. The man who received it, Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquea, was no eccentric outsider. He was a respected physician and professor of medicine in Peru. But that one artifact would send him on a journey that transformed his life and reputation. Dr. Cabrera became obsessed. Over the years, he acquired more than 11,000 similar stones from local farmers and traders, each one etched with imagery that seemed to defy time itself. There were depictions of humans performing open-heart surgery and brain transplant scenes of people using telescopes to study celestial bodies, and perhaps most controversially, humans walking alongside or riding dinosaurs. To Cabrera, these weren't just artistic oddities, they were hard evidence of an advanced prehistoric civilization, one that had mastered science, medicine, and astronomy long before any culture acknowledged by mainstream history. His theory was bold, even outrageous. He suggested that the civilization responsible for the stones might have existed millions of years ago, possibly even during the time of the dinosaurs. Such a claim, if proven true, would not just revise history, it would shatter it. Unsurprisingly, the academic establishment pushed back. Experts pointed out that none of the stones had ever been excavated under professional archaeological supervision. They were sold by villagers, not unearthed from scientifically dated contexts. This lack of provenance made them impossible to verify using traditional archaeological methods. Then came a bombshell. Basilio Ushuaia, one of the main suppliers of the stones, confessed in a televised interview that he had carved them himself using modern tools and materials, including a dentist's drill and shoe polish to simulate aging. For many, that was the final nail in the coffin. The Ica stones were filed away as an elaborate hoax, a clever mix of folklore, forgery, and opportunism. But the story didn't end there. Years later, Basilio retracted his confession. He claimed that he had lied about making the stones to avoid legal consequences. At the time, Peruvian authorities were cracking down on the sale of authentic artifacts, and admitting the stones were fake was the easiest way to stay out of trouble. His reversal raised new questions. Could it really be that all 11,000 stones were modern fabrications? Was it possible that some, just a fraction, might actually be ancient? Supporters of the stones argue that the collection is too large, too varied, and in some cases, too scientifically detailed to be dismissed entirely. Some of the engravings show surprisingly accurate anatomical features, such as the structure of internal organs or fetal development in the womb, that would have been nearly impossible for a rural farmer in the 1960s to reproduce without formal training or access to medical literature. A few stones even appear to display knowledge of planetary alignments or surgical techniques that seem far ahead of their supposed creators. Adding to the mystery, several stones have been analyzed and found to contain microscopic traces of mineral reformation within the engravings, suggesting a possible age far older than the skeptics would admit. Yet no comprehensive peer-reviewed scientific study has ever been conducted to settle the matter definitively. The Ica stones live on in a kind of intellectual purgatory, too fantastic to believe, too strange to ignore. And perhaps that is why they continue to fascinate. In a world where we often cling to the certainty of what we think we know, the Ica stones remain a whisper from the shadows of time, asking us to reconsider, to question, to wonder. Whether carved by modern hands or ancient minds, they have become more than artifacts. They are mirrors of our imagination and of our deepest doubts about history itself. Regardless of the debate surrounding their authenticity, the Ica stones possess something rare and powerful: the ability to tell stories. Not through words, but through imagery carved in stone, imagery that feels like journal entries from a civilization erased by time. What makes these stones truly remarkable isn't just their content, but their emotional weight. If genuine, they represent a civilization that understood human anatomy better than many early modern doctors, that tracked celestial bodies long before telescopes were known, and that lived during an age when dinosaurs still walked the earth. This isn't just about ancient technology, it's about a history of humankind that may be vastly different from the one we've been taught. A history where we were not alone in our brilliance. A history where we may have risen before and fallen again. The story of the Ica stones, whether ultimately proven true or false, remains a powerful reminder of how little we truly know. History is filled with mysteries, once dismissed only to be re-evaluated as new evidence came to light. The Great Pyramids of Egypt were once believed to be nothing more than royal tombs until deeper engineering secrets were uncovered. The Piri Reis map was considered fantasy until modern scanning confirmed it included parts of Antarctica, centuries before they were officially discovered. And Puma Punku's massive stone blocks continue to defy explanation with their millimeter-precise cuts. In that same way, the Ica stones stand as silent witnesses. Perhaps they're elaborate fakes, or perhaps they are the last messages of a lost people engraved not for their time, but for ours. What they teach us above all is to stay curious and humble, because not every answer has yet been found, and some may never be. The Ica stones may be real, they may not, but the true power they hold lies beyond authenticity. These stones challenge us to re-examine our assumptions, to remember that history is not a straight path, but a maze filled with forgotten corridors. In that maze, even a small stone can become a key to a greater story, one that we've only just begun to hear whispering from beneath the dust of time. Deep in the heart of the Pacific Ocean, just off the coast of Pohnpei Island, lies an ancient city that continues to puzzle modern archaeology. This city was not built on land, but entirely atop living coral reefs in open water, something so daring and unthinkable that even today's engineers would hesitate to attempt it. Its name is Nan Madol, and with nearly 100 man-made islets linked by narrow canals, it has earned the nickname the Venice of the Pacific. But unlike the elegant romantic Venice of Europe, Nan Madol was constructed centuries ago using massive basalt stones, many weighing dozens of tons. No cement, no mortar, no machinery. These colossal stones were simply stacked one upon another, precariously balanced on an unstable, submerged reef. And yet somehow, they have remained standing for centuries. This is not just a city, it is a direct challenge to history itself. A place that by all logic should not be possible. When researchers first examine Nan Madol, what stuns them isn't just its age or the legends that surround it. It's a question rooted in practical reality. How was this even built? Imagine this in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, on a shifting coral reef. Ancient builders created nearly 100 artificial islets. Upon these, they stacked thousands of basalt stones, weighing between 5 and 50 tons each. They had no cranes, no vehicles, no pulleys, not even wheels or metal tools. And yet the stones were somehow quarried from distant mountain sites, hauled through dense jungle, floated across the ocean, and placed with extraordinary precision on an unstable marine foundation. No modern explanation fully accounts for this. Hypotheses involving bamboo rafts, levers, or tidal assistance have been proposed, but none are realistic when tested against the actual terrain and scale. And this wasn't a single structure, it was an entire complex rising from the sea. This isn't just a difficult feat, it borders on the impossible. According to what we know of ancient Pacific Island cultures, Nan Madol should not have been within their technical capability. No evidence of a local innovation, no metalworking tradition, and no archaeological remains of large-scale construction tools have ever been found. There is only the end result: vast stone walls rising from water, arranged so tightly that they've withstood centuries of storms and erosion. It's as if someone came, built, and vanished, leaving behind a silent monument to an era we cannot explain. Despite its remote location and strange layout, Nan Madol once served as the ceremonial and political capital of the Saudeleur dynasty, a powerful kingdom that ruled Pompeii for centuries. The city's construction began around the 8th century and peaked in the 13th. Its layout was not random, it was carefully planned, with designated zones for religious rituals, healing administration, and royal burial. At the heart of the complex stood Nandawas, a royal tomb encased by basalt walls over 7 meters tall. Everything was built with intention and reverence, resembling a sacred capital rather than a residential city. But the Saudeleur dynasty eventually collapsed, and Nan Madol was abandoned. No one knows exactly why. No written records survive. No official history remains. A city that was once the center of a kingdom now lies silent, slowly reclaimed by jungle and sea. Though no longer inhabited, Nan Madol has never been forgotten. It lives on in the stories of the island's people. According to local legends, the city was built by 2 brothers, Olosopa and Olosipa, who possessed supernatural powers. With their magic, they summoned the stones into place through chants and spells. After their deaths, their descendants ruled as divine kings until they too were overthrown. Since then, Nan Madol has been viewed as sacred ground, perhaps even cursed. Many locals refuse to go near it after dark. Stories abound of strange sounds, eerie presences, and unexpected deaths among those who dared to trespass. Even modern visitors have reported unusual experiences, disorientation, dizziness, and electronic devices that suddenly stop working once inside the ruins. The mystery is no longer just historical, it feels alive. The mysteries of Nan Madol go beyond construction and legend. Some researchers believe the layout of certain structures aligns with astronomical phenomena, specifically the position of the rising sun during the summer solstice. If true, it would mean the builders of Nan Madol possessed not only architectural skills, but also a sophisticated understanding of the stars and celestial cycles. That possibility opens an even larger question. Did the Saudeleur inherit lost knowledge from an earlier forgotten civilization? To the casual observer, Nan Madol might appear to be just piles of old stones. But to anyone who looks deeper, it becomes clear this is not merely a city of stone, it's a civilization-defying anomaly, unlike anything else on Earth. We often admire ancient sites like Machu Picchu for their elevation or Stonehenge for its astronomical precision. The Moai of Easter Island amaze us with their size and mystery. But all of these wonders share one crucial trait: they were built on land, on solid, stable ground. Nan Madol wasn't. This entire city was constructed on top of a living coral reef in open ocean. There is no solid bedrock, no dry earth, only water and fragile reef beneath. And yet hundreds of stone platforms, tombs and walls, each made of multi-ton basalt logs, stand to this day. No other ancient construction matches this combination of location, scale, material, and improbability. There is no precedent, no blueprint, no clear connection to any other known building tradition. And perhaps most unsettling of all, no written records exist. Not a single line describing its purpose, its methods, or the people who built it. Even oral histories are vague, referring only to 2 mysterious figures with magical powers, not an entire society or kingdom. That absence speaks volumes. It raises the unsettling question: was Nan Madol really built by the inhabitants of Pompeii, Or is it the final trace of a civilization now lost to time? Some have even speculated that the lack of records is no accident, that the knowledge of its construction was never recorded because it was never meant to be known. Whatever the truth may be, Nan Madol remains one of history's greatest contradictions, a place that by all scientific logic should not exist. But it does. In the end, Nan Madol is a contradiction made real, a ghost city with no written history, no recorded builders, and no cultural descendants to tell its story. It exists as a colossal question mark in the middle of the ocean, challenging us to consider whether we've forgotten something vital about our past. Was Nan Madol a ceremonial center, a portal between worlds, or the last remaining trace of a civilization erased from history? We may never know, but until we do, Nan Madol will remain whispering across the Pacific winds, a message from the past, etched in stone, waiting for someone to finally understand it. In the arid highlands of southeastern Turkey near the city of Urfa, what began as an ordinary excavation turned into one of the greatest archaeological revelations of the modern era. In 1994, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt and his team began digging at a hill known as Göbekli Tepe, a site long assumed to be a simple, ancient cemetery. But as the first layers of soil were removed, what emerged was not a burial ground, but a set of massive T-shaped stone pillars, some standing over 5 meters tall and weighing dozens of tons, arranged in mysterious circular enclosures. What truly shocked the archaeological world was not just the size or layout of the site, but its age. Radiocarbon dating revealed that Göbekli Tepe was built around 9600 BCE, more than 11,600 years ago, at a time when humanity had not yet invented farming the wheel or writing. During this period, humans were presumed to live in small, scattered groups as hunter-gatherers, yet somehow they had managed to construct a monumental ceremonial complex of staggering scale and precision. The age of Göbekli Tepe alone places it in a category of its own. While Egypt's Great Pyramid was built around 2500 BCE and Stonehenge dates to approximately 3000 BCE, Göbekli Tepe predates both by thousands of years. It doesn't merely come before these world-famous monuments, it precedes the very definition of civilization as we have traditionally understood it. At the time of its construction, there were no cities, no agriculture, no metal tools, or written language. And yet the people who built Göbekli Tepe transported enormous stone blocks, carved elaborate symbols, and arranged them with architectural intention into sacred ritualistic structures. If the pyramids represent royal authority and cosmic power, and if Stonehenge is a celestial calendar aligned with the heavens, then Göbekli Tepe seems to embody something even more primal, the world's earliest known spiritual sanctuary, created by a society that had not yet settled but was already capable of collective religious experience. There is no evidence of permanent habitation around Göbekli Tepe. No houses, no hearths, no pottery or domestic tools, no signs of metallurgy or wheels. What remains is stone, and the powerful symbolic ideas carved into that stone. So who built it? How and for what purpose? The idea that a society of hunter-gatherers could organize labor forces, transport multi-ton stones, and produce advanced symbolic art flies in the face of the conventional evolutionary model we were taught in textbooks. Compared to other sites of similar age, such as Jericho, 8000 BCE, or Tel Carmel, 9000 BCE, which consist mostly of basic living structures or defensive walls, Göbekli Tepe stands out as a monument of symbolic, spiritual, and ritual complexity. It raises the tantalizing question, was this site the product of a lost culture, one whose intellectual and spiritual sophistication we have completely overlooked When the stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe were first revealed beneath layers of earth, it wasn't just an architectural discovery, it felt like uncovering a vast book carved in stone. On the surfaces of these towering T-shaped monoliths were hundreds of carvings, detailed, abstract, and deeply symbolic. Wild animals appeared in striking relief: foxes, hyenas, aurochs, snakes, vultures, scorpions, creatures from vastly different ecosystems, as if chosen to represent more than their natural form. Alongside them were geometric symbols: circles, suns, crescent moons, rows of dots, and human figures twisted into strange, almost supernatural postures. What's most intriguing is how deliberately these symbols were placed. They weren't random decorations. Each figure seemed aligned to specific directions, reacting to the sun's light and the orientation of space, almost as if every stone circle was designed to function as a spiritual transmission hub. Some scholars suggest these may have formed a primitive celestial calendar tracking constellations and astronomical events. Others argue they were a symbolic language encoding knowledge about survival nature and the cosmos, a stone library containing the worldview of a lost mindset. Unlike the hieroglyphs of ancient Egypt or Mesopotamian cuneiform, Göbekli Tepe has no written script, yet its imagery may convey more pure meaning than any site from its time. And even now, we are only beginning to scratch the surface of what these carvings might have meant to the minds that created them. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Göbekli Tepe is not how old it is, but how and why it ended. Roughly 1 to 500 years after its construction, around 8000 BCE, the entire complex was intentionally buried by the people who had once raised it. It wasn't destroyed by war or fire, nor was it eroded by time or natural disaster. It was deliberately entombed layer by layer with fill, made of earth rubble and animal bones. Excavations show that the burial was not haphazard. It followed a systematic, even ceremonial approach, as if closing a sacred chapter. Each enclosure was carefully filled in, preserving the pillars and carvings with surprising completeness. In fact, it is precisely because of this burial that Göbekli Tepe has remained so astonishingly intact over 10,000 years later. But why would its builders do this? There are three leading theories. First, it may have marked a ritual closure of an old belief system. As people began settling down and adopting agriculture, their cosmology might have shifted, requiring them to bury the spiritual foundation of their old hunter-gatherer world. Second, perhaps the symbols engraved on the stones were considered too sacred or dangerous. Like forbidden texts, they may have buried the site to prevent future generations from misinterpreting or misusing the knowledge within. And third, some speculate that the burial was motivated by fear, a cosmic event, a perceived omen. Something triggered a belief that the only way to protect themselves or the world was to seal Göbekli Tepe away. Unlike other ancient wonders, Egypt's pyramids, which were looted, or Stonehenge, which crumbled with time, Göbekli Tepe stands alone as a monument purposefully buried by its own makers with reverence and mystery. It wasn't abandoned, it was hidden, and thanks to that burial, we now have the rare chance to witness it today, nearly whole, like a sealed letter from the dawn of human consciousness. A message never delivered, still waiting to be understood. For decades, archaeologists believed the trajectory of civilization was simple: agriculture led to settlement. Settlements led to social organization. Temples and religions emerged later. But Göbekli Tepe may flip that timeline on its head. It suggests that belief came first, that the desire to gather for shared spiritual rituals may have driven people to settle down, and only then did farming emerge as a practical necessity. In other words, It may have been the need to connect with the unseen world, with the heavens, with animals, with the spirit realm that inspired early humans to cooperate, build, and transform their way of life. Göbekli Tepe might not be the result of civilization. It might be the reason civilization began. And if a site as extraordinary as this could remain buried and forgotten for over 10,000 years, what other chapters of human history still lie hidden beneath the soil, waiting to be rediscovered? Göbekli Tepe is not just a monument, it is a message, a whisper from our distant past that says, "You don't know everything yet."